All right, today we have us a 2004 Toyota RAV4, and the problem with this is it's a crank no start. Now, the backstory is the owner of this car was out of town with his family, and he was about 200-ish kilometers away from Nairobi, and this car started bucking and surging, and then it would go off randomly. He would restart it, and it would be fine, and then it would start surging again, and then it would go off. So he stopped by a local mechanic at an out-of-town spot, and by the way, I do not recommend you do that. You are going to have problems if you do that. He stopped by a local shop out of town, and they did a diagnosis, and they inserted a wire under the hood. They didn't tell him what the wire is, and I checked, that wire has been removed, so I don't know what it was. But when they did that, he said that it worked for an hour without an issue, and then he started doing it again. Luckily for him, when he started surging and bucking again, he was like 2 kilometers away from home, so he managed to limp the car home. Then he started it up the next day, started up fine, brought it to the garage. Now, this is the garage I normally do diagnosis for in Westlands, and it sat here. Now, the garage said that when he dropped it off and they tried to start it, it was an intermittent crank no start. So sometimes it would crank and start, sometimes it would crank and not start. They changed the crank sensor, and when they did that, the problem went away completely. So they kept the car for a day, drove it around the whole day doing errands, and it was fine. So the next day after that, they said they were pulling into the bay to wash it, and halfway out of the bay, the car stalled, and it has never started since. So now it's a complete crank no start. So they called me, and I told them, oh, I cannot issue you a booking because I was just about to go out of town. I was going out of town the next day. Then the guy begged, he said, please, at least just come and give us direction so that we know what we're doing. I told him, okay. I have a good relationship with him. He's given me a lot of business. So I told him, okay, you're on my way home. I'll just stop by. I won't diagnose it. I'll just give you direction. So this is the direction I saw. You see that security light? That security light was flashing just like it is now. Now, when it's flashing, right now it's normal. In Toyotas, when you have a security light flashing, it's normal when you don't have the key inserted. But once you insert that key, it should stop flashing. Now, look what's happening when you insert the key. We keep flashing. So now when that happens in a Toyota, I will tell you 9 times out of 10, you have a key problem. Because you could only have 3 problems. It's either the key or the transponder, which is a coil in here. It's a coil amplifier. Or the key control computer, which in this case is this box right here. Those are the only 3 problems you have. Now, from experience, that transponder and that key control computer never go bad. Toyota built them to a very, very high standard. The only time you get a bad transponder is when somebody has come here and is ripping the panels and is rough and cracks it. So these are very fragile, because when you insert the key and you turn it, you can see the transponder does not move. So there's usually, because of the action of turning and winding the key, it never destroys the transponder. So usually I've only seen bad keys. And if you look at this key, look at that key. It says there, FUT. You see that? F-U-T. This is a cheap-ass Chinese fob. Now, guys, I'll tell you something about these fobs. When it comes to aftermarket fobs, first of all, I don't recommend aftermarket fobs at all. Stick with factory fobs. Those ones will never die on you. But if you are to get aftermarket fobs, the only company you should stick with is X-Horse. X-Horse only. If you go with other branded aftermarket fobs, especially these FUT fobs, these are very common in the country. These fobs don't have a long lifespan. So I told him, there's something wrong with your fob. You're wasting your time with this car. Get this fob replaced. So I left him with that instruction. I went out of town. 3 days later, he calls me. I'm still out of town. He tells me, hey, you need to book this thing in because it's not the fob. So I asked him why. He said, we've replaced the fob and it's still a crank no start. So I told him, okay, fine, let me book you in and I'll come. So I've come, and this is the second fob that they programmed. And guess what? Look at that brand. It's still a FUT. Come on, guys, come on. I told him exclusively get an X-Horse. He still went and got this, but not my problem. But anyway, doesn't matter, because this fob is actually working. So if you look, see inserting, look at that. Security light does not flash anymore. So this fob, it works, but I will tell you it will not work for long. The longevity is not good for these fobs. But as I said, we still have a crank no start. So let's crank. So we got a crank no start. Okay, so now we need to find out what are we missing. And these guys really tried. You see all this? These panels were not open the last time I was here. So you can taste the frustration here. All those wires out, and here we've got these panels open, wires dangling all over the place. There are more wires loose at the front. Poor guy really tried, and he has pulled his hair out and he has failed. So that's where we come in. Now, since our key is now working, we need to find out what are we missing. Are we missing spark, or are we missing injection? So let's get our scope on this thing. But before we get our scope, let's get the wiring diagram, because I need to see where my injector command lines are and where my coil control lines are. And then we're going to come up with a strategy of finding out what are we missing. Are we missing spark, or are we missing injection? Let's go to the wiring diagram. All right, we're in the service information now. I've opened up two things. This is my repair manual, and then this is my wiring diagram. The reason I've opened the repair manual is because I want to get the pinouts. Pinout view from the repair manual is the best that you'll get. So our engine is 1AZ. Let's go to diagnosis. And our car is 4/2003. So terminals of ECU from 2003-7 onwards. Let me hit that. And now I have a handy dandy terminal view from the back of the ECU. So I'll just keep this here, and I'll use that to easily probe my ECU. Now let's go back to the wiring diagram here, expand it, and we're going to look for our system circuits. This is from 5/2000 to 6/2003. That's not us. Interesting. I don't know why we don't have the other one. Okay, let's go here to the overall. Engine control. And we have it here. So 1AZ, this is to 6/2003, and then there's 1AZ general from 7/2003, but we're not general. So except general, we are Euro, so we're here. And this is from 2003-7 onwards. That's our guy. Let's hit that. And that's our schematic. Blow it up a bit. And let's see. The first thing I want to see whether we have ignition and injection. So here I can see the injectors. So we are going to take injector control for number 1, and we're going to put that on channel 1. So that is this brown red wire on connector C, and connector C is E17. Okay, now let's look for the coil control. Coil control is IGTs, so IGT1 is coil control number 1. So on channel 2, we're going to take IGT1, and that is connector C, pin 8. And this will enable me to see whether we are missing injection or ignition, or both. And then the inputs for the ECU, as long as the security is enabled, the only inputs for the ECU to initiate injection and ignition is the cam which is this one, G2 positive, pin 27 connector E, and crank NE positive, pin 25 connector E. And connector E, we can see here is E15. So now we come here. Our connector in question is E17, pin 1 and 8, and E15, pin 27 and 25. All right, let's do our connections and then we proceed. All right, those are our connections ready to go. Channel 1 on the blue, we've got injector number 1 control. Channel 2 on the red, we've got coil number 1 control. Channel 3 on the green, we've got cam sensor. And channel 4 on the yellow, we've got crank sensor. Let's go to the Pico and see what we're missing when we crank. Okay, we're ready to go. And let's start our Pico here. And our Pico is running, and we're going to come here and crank, put the key in ignition, make sure our security light is off, which it is, key on, and let's crank. Nice. I'm going to come here and pause, and let's analyze that. And I can already see what our problem is. We are missing a crank sensor signal. Okay. So right here, we do not have a crank sensor signal. So we have power to the injectors because I can see here we've got 11 volts going to the injector. We do have power on the injectors. Our IGT line is right here, and that IGT line is hanging about 10 volts, but there is no control on either the injectors or the coils, and that's because we have cam, which is here, we don't have crank. So let's zoom in here. Yeah, we do not have our crank sensor. So guys, how about that? Very quick test, 4 connections, 5 minutes, with a wiring diagram and a scope, and I already know what's wrong with this car. We are missing a crank sensor signal. How much time would it have saved this guy doing all this? It took him, by the way, about 7 hours of fiddling around with all this wiring, both here and on the passenger side and under the hood, and it has taken me 5 minutes just to let you know that we are missing a crank sensor signal. This is the importance of diagnostics. I keep emphasizing the importance of having a good knowledge of diagnostics. If you do not have diagnostic knowledge, you are going to mess around people's cars like what has been done on this one, and you're going to waste your time. So now I want to know, do we have a bad crank sensor or do we have a bad crank sensor wiring? So the crank sensor only requires 2 things, a ground and it outputs a signal. Let's go back to the wiring diagram. So let's come here. This is our crank sensor, and as you can see, we just need an NE positive, that's our output of the sensor, and this is a common ground. And I can already tell you this ground is working. Why? Because we do have a cam sensor signal. That cam sensor cannot work without a ground. So I know at least that any negative is good. But do we have it connected here to the crank sensor? Let's go to the crank sensor, and we're going to probe pin 2, which is our green, and pin 1, which is our red. So pin 2 on the green, I just want to see that we have a good ground. And then pin 1, we are going to probe with a test light, and I want to see my test light signal reaching my computer here. If I see that, we are done. We have a bad crank sensor. Now, he did say that he changed his crank sensor, and I can see one right here. This is the crank sensor that was removed from the car, but this is a used sensor because it has got a junkyard marking on it. And he put a used sensor in the engine. Now guys, don't do this. Do not put used crank and cam sensors, these critical sensors, buy OEM only and get the new thing. You're not saving any money by doing this. So what do we have? Do we have a flaky sensor that was put in there, or do we have a wiring problem? Well, let's see, because remember the owner said that it was wigging out on him as he was coming. So let's go to the engine and we're going to test whether we have a good ground and if my signal is reaching my picoscope, and then we are going to proceed. All right, we're here under the hood. We're going to use two simple instruments, a test light connected to battery positive and a probe, just that. So first we're going to test our test light and we're just going to hit a ground, and you can see we are lit. We have a good connection to battery positive. So we're going to take our probe, and this is my crank sensor connection. That's my pigtail, and this is the harness side, and you can see our red and green wire there, and this is a sensor side. So on the harness side, I know that on the green I'm supposed to have a ground. So my test light connected to battery positive. If I come here and touch, we have a good ground over there. Okay, so we know we have a good ground. Then I want to move, the key is off right now, but I want to move this to the positive side. Now that's the signal side of the sensor. We are not supposed to have a ground here, so let's test that. And look at that, we have a hot lit test light. We have a short on this line. So is that short coming from the sensor side, or is it coming from the harness side? Well, how do we test that? Very easy to test. Let's disconnect the sensor. So there we've disconnected, and we're going to come back with our test light, and we are still connected to battery positive. You can see that. And if we touch here, if we have a short on the harness side, this is going to light. And look at that, our harness is shorted. So we are done. We have a bad line on this sensor line. So is this a harness problem, or is this a computer problem? How do we test that? Well, simple. Let's go and disconnect the ECU, and then we are going to come back here and probe this line. If we probe this line and we've disconnected the ECU and we still have a short, we have a shorted harness. If our short goes away, then our ECU is bad. So let's go to the ECU and disconnect it. There is my harness connection to the ECU. So I'm just going to reach here. I'm going to leave my probes where they are, and I'm going to disconnect it. Now we're disconnected. Let's go back under the hood, probe that line, and see if we have a short. We can actually even test it here, but my test light isn't very long. Let's just go test it back under the hood. Here we are back under the hood, still disconnected. Now we are disconnected here, and we are disconnected inside, and our test light, as you can see, is still connected to battery positive, and that's not a good ground there, but this is a good ground. All right, place your bets. We have a harness problem, or do we have an ECU problem? And look at that, we have a short in this harness. How about that? Very easy test, and we have saved ourselves hours of work just by following our data and doing evidence-based, data-driven diagnostics. Guys, right here, this is what diagnostics is all about. So what we're going to do is isolate in the harness where this short is. First, I'm seeing something funky here. You see this? So let me pull this back all the way up until here, and then I just want to see if we have anything silly going on in there. If not, we're just going to connect a line directly from here to the ECU. Proof of concept, I want to see this engine run. And then I'm going to tell them that they need to fix the harness. This is a diagnosis. If I'm to repair this harness, we are charging separate for repairs. This is not my job to do unless they tell me to do it. But my diagnosis is actually done right here. I can actually stop here, but for the sake of the video, I'm going to continue, and I want to show you that this car will run if we release the short on this crank sensor line. All right, I have stripped out the electrical tape, and this is what we have. So you've got your crank sensor harness side was pigtailed into this side. So this is a different connector. I think they changed the connector and then they extended it to these two wires. But when they did that, this is what happened right here at the base. Now this is going to be very hard to show on camera, so I'm just going to describe what I'm seeing because I've already separated where the problem was. Right here at the base, this red wire has a small tiny cut on it, and this right here is a ground shield. You see that? This is a ground shield. If you look at the wiring diagram, you'll see that there's a shield around this crank sensor wiring. Well, that ground shield, which is this one, was touching the copper conductor inside the red crank sensor signal wire when this was taped together, because there's a cut down here. And that was shorting the signal to ground. And now, if you look here, see that? No short. Very nice. So, I'm going to repair this, but let's connect this one and let's start the car, and we're going to see that we're going to have a crank signal, and consequently, this engine should now start. Okay? Let's go connect the other side of the ECU and then go back to the Pico, start this engine. Okay, we are back in the car and I have my key. Let's put the key on. All right, looks the same as it was last time on the picoscope, but now let's start it. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. Very nice. And first let it run a bit. You can see no check engine light. Let's accelerate. Very good. We can accelerate, and now we are back in business. So this car is fixed. Well, I just have to fix that harness nicely, but this was the issue all along. So what do you think happened here? I think the original problem was the key was wigging in and out. Then the key finally died, and then that problem at the front was induced when this guy, in his frustration, was playing around with the wiring, and he induced that problem of the crank sensor. It is what it is. More money for me when you do stuff like this. I don't mind. Keep doing this and more money will come in the bank. Let's look at this capture real quick. And you can see now we have got injection, and we've got ignition, and we've got our cam and crank sensor. Very nice. So now that I'm here, since I'm already plugged in, I'm just going to take a known good cam and crank correlation, and now we are done with this 2004 RAV4. No start, originally because of a bad key, but induced a crank sensor problem on the harness because a technician was too quick to start snippy and he messed this up. Well, now it's fixed. Another one for the books. We'll see you next time with another good diagnosis. All right, for all you naysayers who think that I made a wrong call initially with this key, that's the old key. We put it in the ignition. You can see the security light keeps blinking. Let's crank it. No start. Okay? Then we just change to the new key. Security light is out and we can start the car. So the original problem was that key. This other one was induced by the technician. All right, have a good day.